Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I have got a fascinating guest. Susie Singer Carter is a filmmaker. She created this documentary called No Country for Old People. And it is a hard, honest look of her story with her mom in a nursing home. We are going to have a great conversation about why she made the film, what we can do better. Frankly, it was one of the hardest ones for me of these I've done to actually prepare for. I'm going to ask you some sort of hard questions because there's some things I sort of struggle with as well. I told you that in advance, but this will be a good, respectful conversation. You're not going to come away. I promise you won't come away mad at me. We'll have a good conversation.
I can't get mad. Get mad. I say what I know. That's all I can say.
Awesome. Perfect.
What I saw.
So, first this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. So I want to actually start by showing one of the trailers. But before we go on, one thing I want to just say, this is sort of an industry note. I have reached out, and I did this morning, and so I haven't really gotten a response back. I wouldn't have expected it. I have invited both ACA and Leading Age to come on a future show to give their perspective. Whether they'll do that, I don't know. But we want to make sure that we hear all sides of this. But before we get started our conversation, let's watch this trailer.
The founder of Cleveland-based Life Care Centers of America is now one of the richest people in America.
Hospice is big business.
Death is a big business.
The way they move their money is just like a criminal enterprise.
They're trying to make her die faster than she wants to.
You're tortured.
So sorry.
And you're tortured to death.
You are literally killing people to make more money.
That's completely inappropriate, and there's terms for that.
What are those terms?
Oh, that's murder.
When cash is the primary reason for doing something.
She's in pain because they're not taking care of her. Sorry.
Oh.
I know.
Anywhere in the healthcare system,
my mother's death was a brutal death at the nursing home.
people suffer.
They're throwaway people. That's all they are, is throwaway people.
We have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves as a country, what are we going to do for our older adults, for our most vulnerable, for our loved ones? And I think that's why you're doing this documentary.
To me, it's the shame of the nation.
Even watching the trailer is pretty tough. Just to make sure we set the stage, I am an senior living industry fan. I tend to focus more on assisted living and memory care than I do nursing home, but generally sort of see them as all part of the same system. We believe that senior living in particular is the best place for a lot of older people, not everybody. But the other thing that's really significant about Foresight that our readers know, or what our viewers know, is that we, as good as we think it is, we think there are lots of things that could be better. And so we spend a great deal of time talking about how to make it better for both residents and for team members. So let's just get, and of course, the other thing about the video is really interesting is there are a number of people who are friends, or I'm friendly with Howard Glickman and Lori Porter. I know Al Powers a little bit, and they're people I have great respect for and their view. And I've watched the whole thing, watched parts of it more than once. It's a very, very hard thing to watch. And I want to start with this question. It's real basic: is why did you make this film?
Well, I made the film because the last 6 months of my mom's life was so harrowing for me, and I felt like I was on another planet. I had no idea what I was dealing with. And when I finally got to the end of that journey and I started to learn more about what was actually going on behind the scenes, and I thought, I like, people need to understand what this industry looks like for real, and that I couldn't unsee all the things I saw. And I felt like if I didn't share it, if I didn't pay it forward, then I'm just as culpable, because I'm like, basically I'm done. Mommy died, and now I'm going to go off and do my life, and I'm not going to tell anybody else what's going on. And I felt irresponsible. And because I'm a filmmaker and because I know the impact of stories, then I knew that our story had a chance of touching people's hearts, so that they would look at this and that they would not say, that's not my problem, that's someone else's problem. That maybe it would touch them enough to activate them to think about it, because we haven't thought about our elder community in the way that they should be for a very long time. And that's really when Gail Weatherly at the end of our trailer says it's the shame of the nation. That really is the shame of the nation, of what that we have, warehouse our elders, because it's become acceptable, but that's because we're not looking at it. We haven't looked at what's actually going on. And so, that's why I chose to.
So one of the things that I was really curious that I was watching it is it feels like, and maybe you recreated, but it felt like much of the video footage you used was things that you captured during your mom's journey. And so did you come to a point early in it where you thought there might be a film here, or is it just the thing you do, or did you capture and recreate afterwards?
I didn't recreate anything. I actually, it's funny you said that. As a family, as my production partner, who's also like a brother to me and was like a son to my mom. So in that narrative that you see where I'm telling my mom her story of her life, that was just a day in the life of, and he loves to take video, and it was just for our archives, for our family archives. And it turned out to be a great thread to base the documentary on. But no, I didn't think about doing a film at all. In 2018, I did a short film called My Mom and the Girl with Valerie Harper, which was my love letter to my mom, and also to, I call it a joyous look at Alzheimer's. I wanted to change the way we look at Alzheimer's. And so that was such a joyful experience for me, and it touched so many people's hearts that I had no clue to do anything about my mom in this area. But when things were happening, and my mom was the victim of chemical restraining, which is when many people in nursing homes, when they're understaffed, which is most of our I'm so sorry, my dog is very involved with this. When my mom was in assisted living, they started giving her Depakote, which I had no idea that they were giving it to her. And Depakote is a drug that is actually off marketed. It's a drug actually for epilepsy, anti-seizure, but they give it to people in nursing homes and in assisted livings. It makes it easier when you're understaffed to take care of people when they're more when they're sleeping. Right. So I thought my mom's Alzheimer's was advancing, but in fact it wasn't. She went from a walking, talking human being to someone who was in a wheelchair and incontinent for the rest of her life. But I found out from her doctor that she was on Depakote, and he told me it was a black label drug. And I had no idea what that meant. That means, someone that has her description, which was an elder person with Alzheimer's, dementia, it can kill you. It can give you strokes and and you can die from it. So when I watched a miniseries called Dope Sick, and Dope Sick was about the pharmaceutical pursuit of the manufacturers of OxyContin. It was an amazing miniseries, but at the end of that miniseries, the head prosecutor talks about his next job, which was to go after Abbott Labs, who are off marketing this drug called Depakote. So therein lies the switch from me just taking photos to doing a documentary, because I invited the real Rick Moncastle, the federal prosecutor, to come on my podcast, which is Love Conquers Alls, and to talk about chemical restraints and what happened, and how he prosecuted this. It was over $1 billion judgment, and it's still happening. Nothing's changed. They're still doing it. So Rick came on my show. He explained that, but he also explained off the show what was happening to me with my mom, because it was right in the middle of it. And he said, this is not specific to your mom's facility. You're dealing with a systemic crisis. I federally prosecuted nursing homes for over 20 years for fraud, abuse, and neglect. And although I have won my cases by case, nothing's changed. And in fact, it's gotten worse. He said, you are a filmmaker. Because I asked him, how can we change this? Like, what can we do as caregivers? He said, that's a really hard question. But I think you're such a good storyteller. You should tell a story. And he said, and if you do, I've been wondering what to do with my 15 minutes of fame. I'll throw my hat in the ring. And then we were off to the races.
Right. That helps a lot. So one just sort of little question that kept niggling at me was, in the first episode, very early on, you showed these flashes of Forrest Preston's mansion, and you talk a little bit about Life Care Centers of America. I've never met him. I actually saw him at a conference a number of years ago. It was very interesting because he was surrounded by people. I think some were guards and some were not. And I know he's very, very wealthy. Man, he must be old too. He's got to be in his 80s, I'm thinking. But anyway, and then you showed some photographs of a couple of other owners, one of whom I recognize. You didn't name him, so I won't name him.
It's okay. You can name it public. It's public knowledge. It's Brias. It's Brias. And it's Shlomo. Yeah.
Shlomo. I have met, and I don't really know him. But you don't actually name any of the nursing homes or hospitals in the film, and I was just wondering why.
The reason why I chose not to do that was because I didn't want anyone to think that this was a personal grudge.
Got it.
And that I was doing it. And I wanted them to know that it wasn't just my mom's facility, that it wasn't just a few facilities, that this was a national crisis. And so I felt like if I was going to out anybody, what good would that do? It's not a single place. It is a system that's gotten itself into this kind of a business structure, a business model, and that is what is keeping us in this kind of a broken system.
So as I watched it, so I am a senior living consumer right now. I've got a 92-year-old stepfather who was living with me. I actually moved him into a small residential home on Monday of this week. He spent 6 weeks. He spent 2 months in a large assisted living community a year ago. It's something the industry fairly familiar with. I've written about it quite a bit, talked about it quite a bit. And before that, my mom was in, his wife was actually had a stroke, and we put her in moved her into a 5-star nursing home. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
A 5-star nursing home, thinking that we could get some rehab for her. And within 12 hours of moving her in, I know that I'd made a horrible, horrible mistake. It was a horrible experience, and it took me a few days, but within a week I had her moved out. So I guess my first question is when you saw this terrible stuff, why didn't you move her?
I love that question because people ask me that all the time. So when somebody is in a state, when they have comorbidities and high acuities, which is what happened once I finally got to see my mom, because remember, we're coming out of COVID. And so it was actually still COVID when all this was happening. I couldn't even get into the hospital rooms when she was being taken to the hospital. So I had secondhand knowledge of what was going on. And that wasn't clear. It wasn't concise, and it wasn't authentic or true, most of it. So by the time I could get in to see her, there's nobody that would take her at that point. There's no way to take her home. There's no way to, I can't, she's on Medicaid at this point. And so Medicaid, as you know, does not do home care at the kind of, especially at the level of acuity that she was at. So now she was in a state of having this stage 4 pressure sore. They had intubated her without my permission. They wouldn't remove the intubation when she could swallow. She was not aspirating, but it was easier. But that, and this is all things learning in the hindsight. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that my mom was swallowing like she wants to eat. My mom wants to eat, So anyway, the point was I couldn't take her home. And I want to say to people listening that many people, even if they could take their loved one home, they may, if someone is immobile, it takes 2 people to move them. If you're the only caregiver, you cannot do it safely. You cannot move somebody if a stage, over a stage 1 or 2 sore has developed. You need to keep repositioning them. Often you need 2 people to do that. If you don't have 2 people, it is not safe. It is not safe for you. You can hurt yourself, and then you can hurt your loved one. It is often just absolutely impossible to take somebody out. And listen, when I kept saying to them, my mom needs to eat, she wants to eat, this is her life, she lives to eat and drink, it makes her so happy. They were like, we get it. You can take her home.
Yeah, and of course, I fully acknowledge that home is often not an option. And when I moved my mom out of a nursing home, we moved her into a residential home, and I had the advantage of having my stepfather and my mom did very well financially, and so we weren't on Medicaid, and we had lots of financial resources that a lot of people simply don't have. And so I know it's very, very, very different.
Steve, can I just say about the money real quick? Well, also, my mother, Alzheimer's can be a very long disease or a very short disease. And my mom's happened to be one of those long journeys. And so, her nest egg, which was quite, substantial, it ran out like most, and it just does. And so there, if you live long enough, it will run out. And that's what happens. And when you go onto Medicaid, you are no longer the customer.
Yeah, I'm afraid often, even when you're private pay, you're only barely the customer, having living that right now. So one of the things that this conversation is so helpful to me, because one of the things I'm hearing from you right now that doesn't come across to me anyway, very well in the film is as you're doing the film, you come across as being like super well educated about this. And so, and I'm realizing now as you're talking that you're just like a normal person, right? And all this stuff is happening and you don't even know the questions to ask. And that's different than me because I live this industry, right? So at least I have the advantage of knowing the questions to ask.
I learned, right. So as I was going through it, I had no idea what I was dealing with other than my own instinct and knowing my mother and knowing and having, very good intuition of a human being and where they're at, because I am a mother and it just happens to be something that I have. It's one of my traits. And I'm also very stubborn when it comes to people I love. And I knew that she was suffering and I knew that there was no reason for her to suffer. Everything didn't make sense. It didn't make. And so but I didn't know all the questions, but I knew that the answers that I was getting were ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you remember when the nurse had my mom's feeding tube up double the amount, right? instead of at 60 milligrams, whatever, I don't know what the flow rate is. I just know that on the machine, it always said 60. When I came in at 10 o'clock at night, it said 120.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out she was getting twice as much food, which she could have thrown up and aspirated on that and died. And all I knew, and the nurse was like, oh, I don't know. I think 120 is correct. I go, I'm not a nurse, but I just know I see her every day and it says 60. Can you check? She didn't know what she was doing. She was looking it up in like a the pamphlet that comes with the machine. She had no idea what she was doing. And then very next day, when we found out what was happening, and I called the triage this is when she was in hospice, they were like, oh my God, I'm surprised she hasn't thrown up yet. Get her off of that. The next day when I talked to the director of nursing and I said, hey, listen, did you get my email? And he said, yeah, thank you for letting me know. He goes, it's a training problem. And I said, well, could she have aspirated from that? He goes, yeah, it does happen. But, anyway, it didn't. And that was it. He just walked away.
So one of the things that really bugged me about this is I think you were way too harsh on hospice. Again, I'm walking the walk right now. My stepfather's been on hospice for about 8 months now. And he was home until just 4 days ago. And hospice was a tremendous asset for us. And we had bath aides twice a week. We had nursing up a week, chaplain. And I certainly could see waste. I mean, they would send us stuff that we don't. The first box of supplies that we got had all this stuff that we didn't need that, you can't send back. You either throw it away or you donate it, which is what we've done. And so it's clearly a money machine. But honestly, hospice is, I think it's one of on one hand, I know there's a lot of money in it, but I think it's one of the most underutilized. It sounds like your experience with hospice was very different.
Yeah. So here's the thing. And two things can be true at the same time. Okay.
That's true. I agree with that.
Okay. So hospice can be, and in its the first time that someone came up with hospice, it's a fantastic idea. It's wonderful. And when it's done right, it's exactly what you said. When everything is done right, it's exactly what it says. The problem is that you've got organizations, you've got corporations that own a lot of these facilities, and they also not only do they own, because they have related parties. So not only do they own their facility, they own their hospice, like in my mom's situation. So they were double dipping. And when somebody becomes too starts depleting the resources. In other words, someone has a high acuity and you're chronically understaffed, because that's how you make more money. You chronically understaffed. So you can't take care of them properly. So once you can't take care of them and they become a burden on your income, now it's much easier to move them into hospice, because hospice is taken care of via Medicare, and it will pay upward to $1,500 a day, depending on how it's billed. That's a hell of a lot of money. That's $30,000 a month to do nothing, because at that point, all they have to do in a facility is keep them comfortable. And that means morphine or Haldol or fentanyl. And that means that even if they get a UTI, they'll say, we'll just keep them comfortable. It's because that is the description of what hospice is supposed to be. They cherry pick from the description. So they will say, your mom, this is the best thing for her. Let's just basically let her go. But when someone isn't ready to die, and they would rather have a quality of life for 6 months instead of no quality of life, then that's a problem. So when someone is just sleeping all day long when they shouldn't be, and they're laying in a bed and they don't get taken outside, they have no quality of life. But they were making money off of my mom, because they were taking from Medicaid and Medicare. So it's business.
Yeah, and I will say, when we started hospice, it was a little weird when they brought in the first batch of drugs, and you've got all this. If you've ever been on hospice, this is true. They hand you a bunch of drugs, and it's enough to kill somebody. if you
Yes.
used improperly. So I agree with that. So I've got 3 big questions for you that I want to hit, and we're probably gonna run a little over time if that's okay with you. Here's the first question: if you were gonna do this over again, what would you do different?
Oh boy. You mean like as if I knew everything now?
Yeah, knowing what you know now, your mom is in the hospital. She has this event. She's going to go to skilled nursing. What would you do differently?
Well, I probably would have, instead of me saying, "Why is mommy in bed?" You know, when I was doing the Zooms during COVID, because I would at 3 PM, we weren't allowed to go see her. I didn't see her for a year and a half. That I would see that she was in bed, and more every week by week, she looked. There was less of her and less of her and less of her. And the nurse and the CNA would say, because we got really close to CNA, she was like, "Susie, I don't know, but it's crazy here. I don't know. I'll ask the nurse. I'll ask the nurse." And no one told me. If I knew now, I would have said, "Something's wrong. I need to get in there, and I have a right to be in there because I am her conservator person. I've been, I went to court. I have that. I need to go in as her conservator, as her guardian, and see my mom and see what's going on with her." And if I saw that was happening, I probably would have taken her out of there and taken her home at that time and let her, because it was COVID. Because, I didn't have to work. I'm sitting at home. I could have taken care of, I would have done something like that. But nobody told me that she was suffering and that she was getting this sore and she wasn't being taken care of. So I didn't know that. I would ask more questions. I would be more pushy. I would know what would work and what wouldn't work. And it would be different. I'm not saying it would have been better because I'm not a doctor and I'm not a nurse and I'm not, and there's only so much you can do. I mean, even ombudsman hands are tied. Our adult protective services hands are tied. There's only so much people can do because at the end of the day, it comes down to policy.
Okay. So second question, and is somebody comes to you and says, "Mom's got dementia. She's failing. She's in the hospital." They want to, and it's sort of related to the first question. They want to send her a nursing home. I don't know exactly what I should do next. What advice would you give to somebody who was in that situation?
That their mom is at assisted living and it's time to go into
a nursing hospital and the hospital wants to discharge her to skilled nursing.
Right, to skilled nursing. So yeah, that's a big dilemma. It's such a big dilemma because skilled nursing is notorious for not doing great jobs with people, and oftentimes people go in for some kind of rehabilitation and end up with 3 other bad things and often pass away when they shouldn't, prematurely. I didn't have that issue with my mom, but I'm told stories every day. I've had people call me saying, "My dad just had a heart attack and I went to visit him and no one's feeding him. He's in rehab and no one's feeding him. He's dehydrated. He looks like he's dying." And then they die. So I would say, because it isn't COVID now, there's nothing you can do to change the system at this point because the system is the system. So you have to watch your loved one like a hawk. You have to be there. Someone needs to be there with them at all times, like you would a child, because anybody who's vulnerable and doesn't have a voice is going to be, at risk.
Yeah, and this is such an important advice, Susie, because this is true in acute hospitals as it is in senior living. Theoretically, you should be able to say, "Here's my loved one. I know you're going to take care of them and you're going to put the best effort in." And the truth of the matter is, you have to be managing it all the time, every day. We have a policy in my family that if somebody is in the hospital and acutely sick, somebody spends the night with them. My wife almost died because that didn't happen, and somebody happened to see her not breathing at the right time, and she was fine. So this is super, super important. The last thing I want to talk to you about is that that I really struggle with in the videos. It seemed to be that you and your other experts sort of suggested that the answer is more regulation, more fines, bigger fines. And I would argue that that's seems to have actually been counterproductive as the fines have gotten bigger and the penalties stiffer. What I see happening in the industry is the industry spends more time fighting and appealing, and all that has happened is we've increased the costs because of all of the legal and the insurance and the staffing and the recording, and it's still pretty crappy.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure we said more of that. What we were saying was that what should be there, what CMS has put forth, and what is in our regulations, which is is oversight, enforcement, and penalties for the regulations that have been there, the good regulations. They're actually, well thought out and well written regulations, but they're not addressed, they're not adhered to, because everything there is no true oversight, there is no true transparency. That's another issue. And I think that, we shouldn't even have to have that, all those things. And I'm not saying more fines, because fines don't do anything. Fines become the cost of doing business for these corporations that only, right? So basically that's written into their business model, and insurance companies take care of a lot of their fines too. And so what I'm saying is there needs to be transparent. What we're saying is there needs to be transparency, because we have these corporate investors who aren't part of the industry at all. They're not you, Steve. They're not a family member for the most part. These people see a very lucrative opportunity, and they've gamed the system. And there's a very powerful nursing home lobby, ACA, as you know, and Leading Age is part of that. And they pay millions and millions of dollars to keep the industry status quo for over 50 years. That's the way it's been. It's not changed. I read from a book, as you know, at the end that was written in 1974, that you think I'm speaking of the same things that are happening today. And yet I'm reading these passages from a book that was written then, because it was the same things were happening, right? So you've got these people that have gamed the system. They own whatever, from, a small amount to a large franchise. They have related parties. It looks exactly like criminal enterprise. There's money laundering. They own these related parties. Like I said, the managerial companies, they have the vendors, they have the pharmacies, and then they raise their prices, but they're paying themselves. Right? So they're taking the money from Medicaid and Medicare, and they're paying themselves. And they're also chronically understaffing, which is why they've been fighting against this minimum staffing for years.
So I'm going to push back a little bit. I do think that I'm going to acknowledge the nursing home situation is really terrible. And there are some people who are profiting grossly unjustly. I think there are a number of people that are actually really want to make it better, who would like to see it better. And I think and the problem is there are lots of people who are competing to have competing interests that are almost always economically driven. Sure. Even as the Biden administration managed to push through very, very stringent staffing regulations that were frankly unreasonable. They went from one extreme to the other, but those requirements were really primarily driven by the unions and his desire to please the unions rather than good conversations. And what I see over and over again is we've got to have conversations where everybody sit at the same table, and it's got to include people like you as well as the industry and the regulators.
Well, I thank you for pushing back. I want to push back on that, because I want to say
you got it.
Yeah. Okay. So, all of our experts, especially like Charlene Harrington, who is the godmother of minimum staffing and staffing ratios, proper ratios. It's really all about ratios, because it's not a one size fits all. So when the 1987 Reform Act, the Nursing Home Reform Act, Maddie, the Nursing Home Reform Act that was the first time we had minimum staffing. Well, there was no ratios, to like the acuity. And so what happened was it was like, well, it was basically like what was necessary. It wasn't really like defined what is a minimum staff, what is a proper healthy minimum staffing rule. So people were like, we're doing it. We're doing minimum staffing. We've got it. We've got, they weren't, and there was no way to enforce it, or because it wasn't written into the policy. So everybody sort of skirted that issue. Now Biden wanted to do that, and this isn't just a union thing. This is a thing that has been studied for decades. What kind of ratio per resident is a healthy ratio that gives the proper quality of care that people need and deserve. So when you have that, and you've done these studies for decades, and you say this is the actual outcome, that is proof. That's not because it's like trying to please a union. I think what Biden did was great. Then what happened was, as we know, just this month, CMS decided to rescind it completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Which is going to be this is going to disaster. It's a disaster.
Well, in my view, the problem is almost more fundamental than that. In that, I think it's a moral problem. Until we get operators who are willing to say, you know what, we've got to figure out how to do a better job. I'm going to name by one company that there's a guy by the name of Deep Cateau who runs a mostly Medicaid nursing home in Atlanta, and they're not getting rich. They're providing good care. It's really, they run on close. No, I wouldn't say close to the margin. I don't want to be disparaging, because they do the right thing financially to take care of their people. But he wishes that and he's, so first I want to say, and he's not there. There's nobody there sucking money out of it, right? So I want to start by saying that. And yet, that being said, he would tell you that he's not doing as good a job as he would like to do, because he needs more financial resources to do that. And so we need a big national conversation where we actually start by saying what's best for the residents, what's best for the team members. And this is not just a nursing home problem, it's a hospital problem. These healthcare systems have been designed to serve the needs of the healthcare system before the needs of the patients, before the needs of the team, and before the needs of the family.
Yeah, it's for the industry, for
that's right.
And it always is follow the money, and it always is it's at the moment, all of our healthcare system is profit over people. It just is. It's a wealth care system, and we're capital. We are a capitalistic country. We also, I think that I don't think I know for a fact that our elders and our most vulnerable are victims to ageism and ableism, and those are the last isms that have gotten attention. And it is an extremely dire situation, because I saw it all the time. I mean, I saw it from doctors. Now that I've interviewed so many people and hear the stigma of people with dementia, because there's not an understanding throughout the healthcare system. But I mean, I had doctors say to me, do you need a Valium to deal with your mom? Like they have no idea. I had the chaplain come into me at this 5-star facility here in Los Angeles say to me, don't worry about your mom. She's got holes in her brain. She's demented. She doesn't know what's going on. And I was like, what? Like, I've been an advocate for Alzheimer's for 16 years now. That is so not true. My mom is more here than you are, and maybe you have holes in your brain. This is where we've come to, where people have just justify. Well, at least they've lived to 89. Well, what if you're 89 and you're still loving your life? Like, nobody has that decision. And when you like our, like Marie the Painter says, who's a head of director of the Ombudsman from Connecticut, says, when you put your name on a facility and say that this is what you do and you're going to take care of people, and then you need to do that, because we're not warehousing people. That's not what you say that you have the expertise to take care of people in these states of health, and this is what you do. So if you don't want to do that and you can't do it, then don't open your business. But if you can, like your friend, your colleague, there are, like I said, two things can be true at the same time. There are amazing facilities out there that are doing the best they can. I think the other corporations that have learned to game the system have, pulled focus. They haven't really allowed the right things to be done for those facilities that are doing the right thing. But there is enough money. It's just not being allocated properly. And they're tunneling money out of there. They're just tunneling it out and it's a very lucrative industry. That's billions of dollars. I'm not talking about a little bit of money. It's billions. The nursing home industry is, and this is not me, Susie Singer Carter, saying this. This is experts that I've been interviewing for the past 3 years. And Rick Moncastle, coming from a federal prosecutor point of view, who prosecuted these individual corporations, who says, this is a follow the money situation. This is what it is. That's what it is.
Okay, I'm going to stop you. We're way past time. I appreciate so much your being here. Great conversation. I could go another hour with you easily. I think the big lesson here, the number one lesson for everybody in and out of the industry, is that nobody is going to protect your loved one like you are. You need to be educated. You need to pay attention. You need to be in the buildings every day. COVID made it really, really hard, but you need to be in the buildings. You need to be asking questions. Honestly, you need to be that family that the community leadership thinks is a pain in the butt. I've been that when my stepfather was in the large senior living community. I guarantee, nobody ever said it to me, I guarantee you they cringed every time I walked through the door, and I was doing a good job. And I was only doing what I was supposed to do. And if they'd been doing a good job, they would have actually embraced what I was saying, because I would have helped them do a better job.
Exactly. And can I just really quickly say, so many CNAs and nurses and frontline providers are doing the best job that they can. They are victims as much as our loved ones, because they can't do the job that they want to do, that they're trained to do, because they're understaffed. If you have to take care of 30 people in an 8-hour shift, you cannot do it.
Absolutely. Susie, thank you very much. We are way past time. Great conversation. Stay on. Let's debrief afterwards. And we will be back next week with two great shows on Tuesday and Friday.